Cambridge Insider podcast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cambridge Insider podcast. Joining me, as always, this is, I think, week number 3, is out of Florida, Meg Hawthorne. How are you, Meg?
Hi, it's good to see you, Stephen. I'm doing great.
Excellent.
How are you doing?
I'm also doing well, thank you. No complaints, no complaints. It's a good week. We are steamrolling towards Thanksgiving. It's almost Turkey Day in the US. I like to give our listeners just a little glimpse into culturally what's happening in the US. So it's almost Turkey Day, and I'm excited for that.
People are starting menu planning. Pretty soon we'll all be shopping, loading the refrigerator, putting all of our family favorite recipes together, doing family polls to find out what we need to include, right? Thanksgiving is really a traditional dinner for a lot of people. Like, everybody has their one favorite dish. Doesn't matter if anything else is there. It's that one favorite dish.
What's your favorite? What's your family favorite or your favorite?
My favorite is the stuffing, or dressing, actually. We make it on the side. We don't stuff. What is yours?
I don't know. So bear in mind, that I'm not a born and bred American, but for the past couple of years, we always go to friends of ours and they do a green bean casserole as one of the side dishes, and I think that's quite a southern dish. I'm not sure, and I just love it. It's so good. Not that difficult to make. So if you are interested, have a look at it. I'm sure you can Google a great green bean casserole, a recipe. But let's get back to action. Let's get back to why we are recording today, which is it's International Education Week. Not sure exactly when this episode is going to be released, but it's in and around the time of International Education Week. Meg, your thoughts, your ideas. I know we've got a couple articles that we've sort of referenced and that we will post in the show notes. Your ideas about International Education Week as a whole?
I think it's great that International Education Week is becoming more of a celebrated event and idea, and also gives a large group of people oftentimes a place to go. And with all of our emphasis on diversity and inclusion lately, I think that a lot of these types of events are being well attended by not only international students or international families, but by the entire student body and interested parties. So International Education Week is an exciting time, and it's also a time for high schools that a lot of these have to do with colleges, big celebrations with colleges. And it's a great time for high schools to be able to kind of look at this and say, okay, have I done anything like this to celebrate or to make my international students really feel part of our team? And what are some other ways that I can do that if I haven't, done that already? It's always great to establish these arenas where people are allowed to celebrate each other as well as their own culture, and it's a whole learning experience, right? So International Education Week is a valuable moment.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong. It's a national sort of thing, celebration, I suppose, event, but every school, every organization, every university maybe approaches it in a different way and does different things to celebrate International Education Week. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, that's very true. And I read an article about one young man at Ohio State. His name is Jacob Chang. He came into Ohio State 3 years ago, and there wasn't much, from my understanding, of a big international support system. There weren't a lot of resources to go to. So for him, it all started with a question about ice cream. He was in a totally typical icebreaker kind of situation, and they asked everybody the favorite flavor of ice cream. That's totally down. Most of us are totally down with it. He's from China. He knew 2 flavors of ice cream in his town. That ice cream is not a big deal there. So he was embarrassed. He didn't even understand some of the flavors that people were talking about. So for him, that's a big cultural moment, right? For him, what is supposed to be this fun, easy, get to know you kind of thing, for him, it kind of made him go, oh my goodness, what am I doing here and where am I? So he took a lot of initiative and actually started working with the school, advisors at the school, and actually at OSU now, there is a committee that's made of faculty and staff and student representatives, and it's an international student support committee. One of the things that he handled, particularly after the pandemic, this has been an ongoing problem, but the pandemic made it so much more difficult, was mental health. Students, particularly international students, have increased the stress so much more. Some of them couldn't get home. Some of them couldn't get back to school. So a lot of them were studying online in a second language, in a different time zone, sometimes the opposite side of the world time zone, literally. So that's something else that they've introduced. So that's one school's process of really not only welcoming so many international students, Ohio State's 11%, but to actually embrace them and give them the resources that they need. I know many of our schools that we work with on a high school level work very hard to include students and to make sure that they're getting what they need academically, in particular, with one-on-one meetings and very, very concentrated college guidance and test prep and all of these things. So then when you're talking emotionally and socially, how are you going about that? And are you able to not only integrate your international students, but integrate the rest of your culture into this group, right? Like, how do we build all of that support and inclusion?
100%. I love that story for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think it's so valuable. You mentioned 11% is the number of international students at OSU, and it's, you know, that we often see that's a similar number reflected across the country at different schools, at different institutions. It's anything from 10 to sometimes 20, 25% of your student body is made up of international kids. You know, it's so important to learn from somebody from a different culture, but also to teach, you know, those people something about your culture. And I think it's often seen as a one-way street. And I think international education and sharing of ideas is a two-way street, where in the typical example of our high school partners, we have an American kid that has grown up in a town. He goes to a school and he meets somebody from Vietnam. And the expectation is somebody from Vietnam is going to just teach me a little bit about Vietnam. But really, it's a reciprocal relationship where, but, you know, I'm from Florida, or I'm from South Carolina, and I can teach this student from Vietnam something about my culture, whether it be ice cream flavors or, you know, football rallies or, you know, baseball rules, whatever it might be about my culture that I can sort of impart on them. So I think that's an important part. I also like the idea that the student advocated for themselves, because yes, we put a lot of emphasis on our schools and our universities taking the directive and saying, what are we doing for our international kids? But in the same breath, I want to urge international students that are potentially listening to this, don't be scared to advocate for yourself. This is a country where people use their voices really, really well. Advocate for yourself. If you feel there isn't, you know, a platform for you to talk about some of these cross-cultural challenges and immersing yourself better in the challenge, take it up. Form a club, form a society where you can share some of these ideas. So, you know, I think if there's one thing that this week reminds us of, it's that idea of like learning something, but also teaching something, and that reciprocal relationship, I think, is so vital.
And we have another school that's actually doing that very, very well. A group of students decided to take up International Student Week, and that is the Razor's Edge Global Scholarship Program, Global Scholars, within the Nova Southeastern University. So Nova Southeastern University it's in Southwest Florida. It is a very diverse school itself. There are over 116 countries represented, nationalities within the student body. And then they also have elementary through high school that is, they have probably 60 or 70 different nationalities represented there. So this is already a very diverse community. And this Razor's Edge Club said, you know what? We are really going to celebrate this. So they're celebrating it through education, which is something that our schools do on a regular basis to really make sure that the students understand the processes that are going to make them successful. For this particular education week, they're dealing with a lot of college students. So it's how to get jobs on campus, off campus. How can you set yourself up to be able to work after college? Like all of these different processes, which are a lot of hoops to jump through. They're also doing a flag parade, which I know that we've done at some of the schools that I work with, which is so emboldening to everybody, right? To be able to walk down and now everybody gets it, right? They understand. So they're doing that. And then of course they're doing a whole celebration. And this is something that is so easy for a school at any level to do. It just takes some organization, and it usually gets a lot of buy-in. They're doing a cultural celebration. So people are bringing their music, they're dressing in costumes to represent maybe the history of their country. They're bringing in foods from different places. There's all different types of action games, board games that are indicative to their country. So it just makes for a really fun way to build some understanding.
100%. I think two great examples that you provided that I hope are going to spark some other ideas from schools and from universities and from students to say, how can we use this week as a catalyst to talk about and to immerse ourselves in some of those wonderful things that are around us. I think for anybody that still doubts the value of international education, I think it's the reality of the world. We have so many multinational corporations. So once you graduate from high school, you start working for a company, be it a finance company or an international education company or an engineering firm. Most likely, you're going to deal with somebody or have a colleague or a co-worker that is either from a different country, currently was born in a different country, has a different culture, has grandparents or parents that are from a different culture. It's such a valuable experience to be able to immerse yourself and to ask those important questions and to understand and have that hunger to understand people that are a little bit different. That idea of diversity and inclusion, I think, is a essential part of education as a whole. Apart from what we're learning in the classroom, what are we learning in our day-to-day interactions with students that are not exactly from the same town that we are? And I think it's a very useful tool for our youth to be
yes.
engaging in.
Cultural awareness is so important because, like you said, as you go on, once you get to college, there's going to be a diverse population there. You may or may not choose to seek them out. They're definitely there. As you go on to jobs, you're working with such a different, vast group of people. So the more that you can appreciate and be aware and acknowledge and accept, the better off you are. It's definitely an integral part of education these days. Exactly.
Meg, where were you born? Which state were you born?
California.
You were born in California. So this is the prime example. I was born in South Africa. Meg was born in the US, in California, and we are working together on this podcast. So it's an example right in front of all of our listeners to behold. Any final thoughts from your side as we end off the episode today?
I thought that the whole celebration and the reasons behind the celebration and the idea of these students really taking the initiative and driving not only the celebrations, but the changes that are happening in their schools and the awareness and the resources that are either they're developing resources or sharing resources so that everybody can benefit.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was very important.
Absolutely. Let the International Education Week be a reminder of the value of international education, but also a sort of an opportunity for us to reflect. Are we doing everything we can to immerse ourselves, to learn, to teach, and to make sure that we all feel, accepted and in a community that we can learn from? So awesome article, couple articles. We'll make sure Executive Producer Dean puts those in the show notes. As always, to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, do all of those good things on the channel that you're listening on, and drop us a note. We have the contact details in the show notes. If you need to get in touch with us, if you want to ask us a question, if there's a future topic that you want us to deal with, that's the perfect place to remind us about that. Until next week, we'll catch you around the next episode. Bye-bye, everybody.